Shalom, shalom, Shabbat shalom again. This your brother Isaiah, Azrael, and Danal from the Hopeful Elect coming at you with another Sabbath lesson discussion, class, podcast, whatever, whatever you call it, right? We want to start by giving all praises, glory, and honor to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We do so through the name of his only begotten Son, who serves as an instrument of salvation for the nation of Israel, that nation in which we talked about last night, who Christ came to gather together, right, for the sake of the Most High God's plans for the healing of the world, right? So the lesson today is titled Stop Helping Scatter, right? It's similar to the lesson that the brother Denal brought out last night on our Freestyle Friday, saying if you're not gathering, you're scattering. But it's just going into different characteristics of how you help scatter the sheep, right? So, again, through the spirit of the Most High, Most High willing, you're edified in all things. And Most High willing, we won't be super long on here. And I know it's the Sabbath, we ain't got nothing else better to do. So, by the Spirit, we're led. But if we can just go ahead and get right into the scripture. Let's pull up Matthew 12. Let's pull up Matthew 12 real quick. And if a brother, whichever one reads this, we can popcorn. One read one read the other.
Matthew 12:30. He that is not with me is against me, and he that gathereth not with me scattereth abroad.
Right. Similar to saying, we can just pull it up. Let's go to Mark chapter 9 and let's start at verse 38. You can keep it wide, but let's go to Mark 9 and 38. Because it's similar to saying and the same quote that Mark kind of said it, right? Or that it says in Mark. Because the whole purpose of this lesson is to go into characteristics of what it looks like to help scatter the people. Now, if you don't know the difference between what gathering is and what scattering is, then I suggest you go watch the class from last night that the brother Denal did. But in short, pretty much I'll just sum it up like this. Gathering is when you're helping bring the people together as Christ was called to do, right? Scattering the people is when you help break the people apart. It's not a good thing to want to send a certain people group, an ethnic people group, away from their homelands, their traditions, their morals, their values, especially if that specific people group made a covenant with the Lord. And if that specific people group was to be in rulership, the whole world would rejoice, right? So let's read this in Mark 9 and 30, starting at verse 38.
Book of Mark, chapter 9 and verse 38. And John answered him, saying, Master, we saw one casting out devils in thy name, and he followeth not us. And we forbade him, because he followeth not us.
And before the brother keeps reading, this is one characteristic of how you help scatter the people, right? So I'll start with this, because I wasn't going to use this, but being that it says what it says, I think it's only right. It's only befitting. So a lot of times nowadays, you'll see certain people doing things, and you'll see a certain people. Well, let me rephrase that. Nowadays, there may be a trend of something, right? And somebody is known for it, famous for it, right? But there could also be somebody who's doing it as well. And what our people like to do and tend to do is say, oh, you got that from so-and-so, so-and-so. Oh, why are you still in so-and-so trend? Oh, you ain't so-and-so, so why are you copycatting? You know what I'm saying? And that's one way you help scatter the people, is to make people feel like the same works that you did, which benefit the kingdom, right? I'm just putting a little twist on this. The same works that you did to help gather the kingdom together, other people can't do. Or the same scriptures that you read, you feel like other people shouldn't be allowed to read, right? Or if they do read it, you like, oh, okay, you got that breakdown from me. Oh, okay, give me credit for my class. Or, oh, you come around and it's like, oh, why you want to come around to, you know what I'm saying, to steal my breakdown? Or why you want to come around to steal my precepts, right? Who are you? Just some ways that I feel like it happens in our community nowadays. And I'm not talking about just the Israelite community, but I'm speaking in those who follow the commandments and our brothers and sisters who may not be aware of the commandments or of who they are, right? It happens across the spectrum. So saying that to say one characteristic of helping scatter the people is by making people feel like they're wrong for doing something that, you know, the Most High ordained all of us to do, in a sense, right? And I don't know the exact word or terminology how to bind what I'm saying to what the scripture is saying, but I know that what I'm alluding to is, let's just use the word, right, the Bible for an example. None of us own it, right? None of us wrote it personally. You know what I'm saying? All of the words that you see recorded, right? We know certain things such as the Johannine comma and other certain various meticulous words that were kind of added to help the reader's understanding of the King's English. We get that, but a lot of these words that were written came inspired by the Most High, and the letters that Paul wrote to a majority of the churches came from Paul, you know. So none of us wrote the word, none of us was the original author, therefore none of us can take the credit or can take all the, I guess you could say, glory for giving certain understandings of the word. Because why? The purpose is that the word go forth to help wake up the nation of people, to help gather the people together. And it doesn't matter if you see somebody from the other side of the land that may not be associated with you, you may not know them, but they're teaching somebody the Bible the same exact way you taught it, you know, on YouTube or in public, wherever they got it from, they got it from you. Doesn't matter if you see them doing it. You shouldn't be the type of person to want to take credit for it, and you shouldn't be the type of person that you can kind of, you know, boast yourself up in. Oh, you got that from me. That's my thing. You know what I'm saying? X, Y, and Z, right? And you shouldn't want to not be cool with that person for learning directly from you and using the information that helped wake them up, you know what I'm saying, on other people as well, in a sense, right? So I don't know if it's, like I said, the point I'm making is that, again, it's like copyright. We don't own anything. So it doesn't matter if somebody from across the world is doing it. If Brother Denal's class last night, somebody in California watched it. They don't know us. They never talked to us, but they're teaching the same exact thing he taught, the same way he taught it, verbatim, bar for bar, to one of their family members or friends. I don't think it would be right for Brother Denal to say, hey, give me credit for that, you know? Because at the end of the day, it's for the glory of the Lord, you know? And that's pretty much what I'm alluding to, right? At the end of the day, all of this is for the glory of the Lord. So we got to minimize one characteristic and stop thinking that, you know, we're him. We're that one person to do X, Y, and Z, because we taught many classes about why we shouldn't boast in our works, you know, why certain things, why we shouldn't glory in certain things the way we glory in today's time, right? But let's keep reading on this.
Con, I wanted to say too, man, this all comes down to you cannot claim a foundation, or you cannot claim the truth. How a lot of people end up being scattered, because, you know, you have a lot of people now that claim that they're leaving the truth, but I still believe in God. I'm leaving the truth, but I still keep the commandments. That the reason why they're saying that is because people come in this thing and claim that they are the truth, and what they're doing is the truth, and anything else other than that is not. Or they claim, oh, you're building on somebody's foundation. You're building on my foundation. You're building on another man's foundation, not knowing that the foundation, right? The foundation is Christ. So if you building, when it's talking about building another foundation, it's talking about any other doctrine or anything that doesn't preach Christ. We know that Christ is the solid foundation on which we all stand. So you can't claim that you have a foundation. You can't claim that you are the truth. And if somebody's not following you, is not. All that does is scatter people away, man, and it can cause confusion, because people from the outside looking in like, what do you mean that you're not in the truth anymore? Well, I just don't, associate myself. Man, what's the Bible definition of the truth? What's the truth? The way and the life. It ain't, you know what I'm saying? And so that's the whole thing, man. The whole thing is people come in this thing, they don't remain humble or meek, and they want to claim stuff, right? But
That's pretty much exactly how I was trying to say it. But like I said, sometimes, you know, I may not have the right, you know, rigmarole to put two and two together. But nonetheless, like the brother just said, claiming the truth, right? Like you, the author, you're the creator, or your body is the author and the creator. Uh, at the end of the day, man, the truth is the word of God, the laws of God. And again, We cannot take credit for his work. We can't take credit for none of the prophets' work, and we can't even take excuse me, we can't even take credit for the Apostle Paul's work, right? Because we weren't around during that time, and we're not them. We're not those men in the Lord. We go to the book of Sirach, chapter 44, and it talks about now let us praise famous men. None of those men are us right now. So at the end of the day, like the brother said, one way you help scatter the people is by claiming the truth and claiming that if it's not by you, your camp, your leader, whoever, then it's you can't do it or you shouldn't be doing it, right? You shouldn't be teaching this if you're not a part of so and so, right? That's one characteristic of it. Now let's keep reading.
Verse 38. And John answered him, saying, Master, Salaki, verse 39.
You can read it from the top again, just to reset the stage.
Starting at verse 38. And John answered him, saying, Master, one casting out devils in thy name, and he followeth not us. And we forbade him, because he followeth not us. But Jesus said, Forbid him not, for there is no man which shall do a miracle in my name that can lightly speak evil of me.
Right. Keep reading.
For he that is not against us is on our part.
Right. He that is not against us is for us, right? On our part. So pretty much saying, if he's casting out devils in my name, then why are y'all forbidding him? Don't forbid him because he's not against us. He's doing exactly what I'm here to do. Cast out devils, right? Speak evil out of the people. Put evil away from among you, right? And these are some of the things that in today's time, we forget that, again, when it comes to, when it comes to understanding how the people should truly be gathered, we got to stop having such a hater mentality. You know what I'm saying? Like, we got to stop hating on one another when it comes to, like the brother said, claiming the truth, when it comes to breakdowns, when it comes to scriptures, right? You might pull out a scripture you thought nobody ever heard of before, and then you see somebody else using it, and then now it's just like, oh, they got that for me. Like, we got to stop having that hater mentality to an extent, right? And even in the world, right? We got people in the world kind of, I guess you could say doing the same thing with other things like we do with the Bible. They try to claim styles, they try to claim certain trends, they try to claim certain materialistic things of the world like they were the ones who created it, when in all actuality none of us did, so we just have to be mindful of how we, again, treat one another and how we look at one another when it comes to dealing with the word of God and when it comes to other things in manner of business. You know what I'm saying? Let's keep reading though.
God, for he that is not against us is on our part.
Mm-hmm.
Whosoever shall give you a cup of water to drink in my name, because you belong to Christ, verily I say unto you, he shall not lose his reward.
Right. He shouldn't lose his reward because he gave you a cup to drink in his name, right? Let's read verse 42.
42. And whosoever shall offend one of these little ones that believe in me, it is better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck and he were cast into the sea.
Brother Azrael reads that same scripture. I'm not gonna say a lot like every time we go to camp, but it's a scripture that we always bring up from time to time when we're talking about, being offensive to those, especially the little ones who believe in the name of the Lord, right? At the end of the day, one characteristic of scattering the people is by being offensive to them, right? And the way you offend them is by telling them what they're doing is not of God because you're not a part of us, right? Or what you're doing is precept stealing, or what you're doing is you're watching us to learn breakdowns to go teach to somebody else as if you taught it, and that's like, again, I've heard these things in the truth, and not only in the truth, but people do it in the world too. So sometimes we got to stop trying to be so gatekeeper. Like, we got to stop trying to play gatekeeper with the word of God, with the letters of Paul, the epistles of Paul, with anything that's written in the Bible, honestly, as we know it, because at the end of the day, we weren't the ones to create it, right? The breakdowns that you hear today are probably some of the same breakdowns that you heard way, way, way before the year of 1969. Way, 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 way before you ever heard of of the transatlantic slave trade, right? Some of these, there's nothing new under the sun, like Ecclesiastes 1:9 say, right? So I'm just led to believe that being that there's nothing new under the sun, same stuff we hear today is the same stuff that was being heard during the times of our foremothers and fathers, right? It's just a different era of bringing it out. But let's go to the book of Sirach chapter 30 real quick. Sirach 30. And I want to go here because, again, I was having a conversation with my wife and just talking to her about, some of my experiences at a basketball game last night. And to be honest, man, I realized as an adult, right? Even though I'm only 26, right? So I'm not old. I'm older than the younger people, but at the end of the day, I'm not old to where it's just like, I'm on Social Security and getting, I guess you could say senior citizen discounts. But I feel old to an extent because of how so far removed from the younger generation I am. And what I mean is, I'm not talking about age. I'm talking about just in morals, values, and principles, right? Saying that to say, I seen a lot of things last night that just kind of made me, be astonished to an extent, right? Of how far apart or really set apart you truly are once you living in the word of the Lord and you see how different things are in the world for people around them, right? Specifically speaking on this chapter because we're talking about parenting, right? The stuff I seen from the youth last night, they didn't just wake up one day and just say, okay, I just want to be like this. A lot of the stuff you see that young people do, it comes from, again, not having a parent to correct you. I think we talked a little bit about that last week on live, just talking about, being corrected. But nonetheless, let's start at verse number 1 because I'll explain the points as we read.
Sirach 30 and verse number 1. He that loveth his son causes him to often feel the rod, that he may have joy of him in the end.
Right. Salakia. So if you love your child, right? Excuse me. If you love your child, it's just like Brother Denal's favorite precept. What is that? Proverbs 3:11 or 11:3, where it talks about he that loveth his son chasteneth him.
Yeah, I think it's 11:3.
God. So if you don't love your child, if you don't love your child, if you don't love your friend, if you don't love your neighbor, one thing that you'll never do is correct them when they're wrong, right? If you don't truly love them. And this is what this is talking about. It's saying that if you love your son, you cause him off to feel the rod. Why? Because there are certain things that your children cannot do, especially when you're living according to the laws of God. You know that there are certain behaviors that your children cannot exemplify because why? It's not of the Lord. So you're going to have to cause them to feel the rod. You're going to have to discipline them. You're going to have to correct them. This doesn't mean take a staff and just start beating them with it over the head. Feeling the rod can come in many different various ways. Now, I'm a firm believer in spare the rod, spoil the child. But again, the rod of correction could be various different forms of discipline, right? But nonetheless, it's still discipline at the end of the day. So what I'm saying is that another way, excuse me, another way we help scatter the children, another way we help scatter the people is by not disciplining one another or not holding each other accountable for certain actions. I know this is specifically talking about children, right? And I'm going into how parents, I guess you could say not the new parents, but the parents of the younger generation today have done a lot of, or a lack thereof, they haven't really disciplined their children as much as they should have. Why am I saying that? Because of certain behaviors that I've seen and witnessed firsthand on a personal level, right? I'm a basketball coach. I work with the younger generation every day, right? My whole point is I see a lot of certain behaviors that I feel like should have been corrected at when these children were at younger ages. But because their parents, they didn't know the laws of God. They were ignorant too. They didn't know any better. They're raising the children to the best they can. Or it's the excuse of, well, I'm old, but I ain't, I still want to be sexy, stuff like that. Like, all I'm saying is that their parents let a lot of things slide. And that's something that we can't do is turn a blind eye to evil, right? So, again, the first characteristic when we talked about, gatekeeping or claiming the truth, right? Gatekeeping or claiming anything that you know that you weren't the sole creator of. The second way you do it is by turning a blind eye to wickedness, right? You turn a blind eye to wickedness, you help scatter the people. Why? Because if you don't let people feel the rod of correction, if you don't hold them accountable, if you don't discipline your children, or if you don't try to reach out to somebody who may have caused offense and try to show them, a better way of doing it or a more righteous way of handling a situation, then you're somebody who's helping scatter because you're turning a blind eye to certain things that are done, right? Let's read verse 2.
Verse number 2, he that chastises his son shall have joy in him and shall rejoice of him among his acquaintance.
Like, it's a good thing that when you're out in public and you have children and your children are sitting in order, and then people walk up to you and say, your children are so well behaved, right? Now, you may look at them like, shoot, you need to see them at the house. You know what I'm saying? And my thing is, I don't mind my children going a little, crazy inside the house because it's controlled chaos. They're in a controlled environment. But the way I try to raise them is when we're out in public, you got to behave and act a certain way, right? Because why? Your actions not only affect you, but they also reflect upon myself and my wife, and they also could affect people around you. If you're acting stupid and you're out with your friends, you can get your friends into trouble, or you can get your friends in great harm, right? So you always got to hold yourself accountable, especially out in the public. But more importantly, all I'm saying is that when you will discipline your children, especially certain things they won't do, certain attires as parents. I seen last night at this high school basketball game I went to, and I said, never in a million years would I let my child wear this at the house. You know what I'm saying? Just certain things like that, because that makes a big difference in how we help gather and scatter the people. Why do I say that? If we could real quick go to the book of 1 Timothy chapter 2, and let's go to verse 9. Right? And I'm saying all this for a specific reason. So I'll try to make the points a little quicker so that way you can understand what I'm saying. Reason number 1, gatekeeping, hating, claiming something that you aren't the sole creator of, right? Reason number 2, lack of accountability, lack of discipline, right? Let's read this real quick. 1 Timothy 2:9.
1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 9. In like manner also that women adorn themselves in modest apparel, with shamefacedness and sobriety, not with broidered hair or gold or pearls or costly array.
Right? Women need to adorn themselves in modest apparel. So the reason I wanted to read this is because we know that there are certain, I guess you could say, there are certain disputations over what this actually says, or what modest apparel actually looks like. That's better. There's certain disagreements about what modest apparel actually looks like. So we're not going to get into that. But what I am going to say is that the way I view modesty is different from the way a lot of brothers may view modesty. But at the end of the day, however you're raised to view modesty, not even however you're raised to view it, because there's a wrong way that you could be viewed. There's a wrong way to view it as well. But I would say this. If you're somebody who's being raised up in the word of the Lord, you know that certain things, the Lord, you wouldn't even wear that in the Lord's presence. The Lord wouldn't be appreciative of you wearing that to his house. You know what I'm saying? It's the same thing. Like if I was to have brothers on the screen over, I wouldn't expect my wife to come out the room looking like she does when it's just me and her walking out in the house freely. You know what I'm saying? Because there's a certain level of respect and modesty that you have to uphold, especially when you're outside of your house, right? Especially when you're in a public setting. Again, the reason that we struggle with certain things, such as modesty in our young women, such as, sexual exploitation of our young women and our young men, the reason we struggle with certain things is because, again, there's a lack of accountability and a lack of discipline in our communities. People continuously turn a blind eye to wickedness that causes us to be able to do these things. It gives us passes to be able to sin. And that's what we need to eliminate, right? This is how you help scatter the people of God, the people that God chose to be his authoritarian, his ruler in the new kingdom, you help continuously drive these people away from the covenant when you choose to make an excuse to do the wrong thing, right? I seen a video on Facebook like 2 weeks ago, and it was of a well, it was a little over 2 weeks ago, but the video was of three black men, and they had a family business, and one of the younger brothers, he showed up to work with a tattoo on his face, and one of the older brothers was raising hell about it. But the problem is that there was people in the comments justifying the brother with the tattoo on his face, saying, "Man, it's a family business, so you ain't gonna fire him. You shouldn't fire him. At the end of the day, he can do what he want. Tattoos don't reflect what type of person, what type of character you know." And that's the type of behavior that causes people to go astray from the Lord. That's the type of behavior and excuses that that literally explain why we're in the situation we're in, because no one wants to hold themselves accountable and discipline each other for the sake of, gathering the people together. Again, the brothers on the screen have held me accountable for certain things, right? We've held each other accountable on certain things. It would be foolish to be around people that don't hold you accountable for anything and think that they truly love you, right? Or think that they have your best in their mind, especially if you know you're living a lifestyle that's wrong and can lead you to an early grave, and they don't say anything about it just out of the sake of, well, that's you. You got to live your life. That ain't my life. And that ain't the type. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say one reason why he tells us to scatter is for that reason, right? Um, contrary to gathering. You said what?
You said scatter on accident.
Oh, to gather. Right. That's contrary to scattering though. Gathering, it helps us keep us accountable, right? And not always it doesn't always have to be like an outright rebuke or something like that, but being amongst like-minded people that have the same goals and aspirations as spiritually, a lot of times their presence alone will hold you accountable, right? Versus leaving your people, right, and going joining to different people or different cultures and stuff like that. When you do wrong, you're less likely to feel guilty. You're less likely to be held accountable for your actions. Therefore, you make more bad decisions, right? But when you gather together, oh nation not desired, just being around each other will hold you accountable, even when it's unspoken. A lot of times, the three of us have witnessed brothers that are, that are quote unquote in this truth, right? Know who they are, know what they're supposed to be doing, but they make the sole decision to go or to not gather themselves with like-minded individuals. They make the decision to go amongst people that they know is not going to hold them accountable as an excuse to not do what they're supposed to do, right? That's the part that actually helps scatter the nation, right? Because when you go out there, you become stumbling blocks for those that they got eyes upon you, right? So just like what the brother said, man, just gathering together lessens the amount of bad decision making, because the presence alone of being around people that you know is going to hold you accountable is going to hold you accountable without them even saying anything.
Right. Amos 3:3, man, could two walk together lest they be agreed. And that's not to say that we shouldn't associate with other brothers and sisters just because you believe something a little bit differently in the scriptures than I do. But that's more so to say, like, how can you truly walk with somebody who doesn't even, care about who you truly are? And I'm not talking about like what's your sole purpose in life. Like, I'm talking about who you are. Who do you descend from? What's your nationality, your background, your heritage, right? Why is our people in these conditions? If people don't care about that, it's truly hard for me to truly be around them and enjoy their presence. Or it'll be even really hard for me to call themselves a friend, because at the end of the day, I know that there will be certain situations where brothers on the screen could be more of a service than somebody who maybe I knew from a couple years ago. And I'm not talking about in a sense of, needing something. I'm talking about in a sense of, needing a friend to help maybe prove something, or needing a friend to hold you accountable for something. Brothers on the screen have more wisdom than a lot of our people, not for the sake of just boasting in what we know, but boasting in the sense of, even knowing the simple things of the scriptures, right, is better than not knowing nothing at all. And our people tend to say that they know something, but truly don't care about learning it, honestly, because the society that we live in teaches a different, I guess you could say, teaches a different way of getting to know Christ, getting to know who you are as a person, getting into the kingdom of heaven, right? So it's many variables that come with that, right?
People get barbershop wisdom, or the women they get
Salon, beauty
salon
salon
wisdom.
wisdom.
You know what I'm saying? And they'll hear something that sounds profound, and make that a slogan or a motto for their life, and they'll go and teach that to somebody else because they think it's so powerful. But all the time, it might be something wrong. You know what I'm saying? For example, you get barbershop wisdom. In the barbershop, they might tell you, man, you young, man. You know what I'm saying? Don't settle down till you about 35, man. Go ahead, get it all out. And you taking that to the head, thinking that that's deep wisdom and it's profound and it makes so much sense, and that's why you feeling the way you feeling. The next thing you know, you listening to them, and now you got an STD that you can't get rid of, or you got a virus or something because you was trying to live your best life until you was 35, or what I'm saying, simple stuff like that you may think is wisdom when really it's just foolishness. But the only way you get true wisdom on how to act and move in this life is if you get, like the brother Isaiah saying, the wisdom from the scriptures. And that's the people you need to have around you, is the people that have that wisdom already, or that have some sort of knowledge of that wisdom. So that way, what I'm saying, they can shepherd you in the right path.
Right. Because let's go to a different scripture. Proverbs 22:6 real quick. Right. There's a reason that, again, I wanted to hit on these points, because at the end of the day, we're talking about characteristics of scattering the people. The first one we talked about, again, is claiming the truth, right? Or claiming anything, gatekeeping, trying to I guess you could say, make spreading the word of God as, gang banging, right? If I see you out here repping this and I ain't never seen you a hood a day in our life, we gonna beat you up, or you ain't with us. You ain't really, what they call it is false claiming, right? They call it false claiming in the streets. But nonetheless, in the truth, we do it too. But we just don't call it false claiming. We make other names up for it. You know what I'm saying? We say stealing, we say X, Y, and Z, right? So let's read this real quick in Proverbs 22:6.
Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it.
So the reason that I wanted to read 1 Timothy 2:9, adorn themselves in modest apparel, because like the brother said, if we don't have the wisdom, it's going to be hard to truly, if you don't have anybody around you with wisdom, it's going to be hard to truly gather the people together according to how the Lord said we should gather our people together, right? Because again, at the end of the day, we're a nation void of wisdom, right? Which is crazy because the Lord gave us the law, statutes, and commandments. He told us in Deuteronomy 4 that surely these people should say this great nation, right? Uh surely this great people is Deuteronomy 4 and 6, right? But nonetheless, what I'm saying is that we were a nation that the other nations were supposed to come to for the wisdom. And now we're seeking it out, like the brother said, from other cultures, from other heritage, from other people groups, right? We look at their wisdom above ours because, again, they've been lords over us. And they've only been lords over us because we failed to truly gather the people together according to how the Lord said we should. How do we do that? Because one, we stopped training up our children in the way that the Lord ordained us to train them up. Deuteronomy chapter 4, it said, teach them thy sons and thy sons' sons. What was the teaching that we were supposed to give them? The teaching of the laws, the teaching of the commandments, right? The teaching of the ordinances, right? The teaching about who you are, the teaching of modesty, the teaching of shamefacedness, the teaching of sobriety, right? We left all those teachings to go learn about how to turn $10 on Forex into $15 million. We left those teachings to learn about rich dad, poor dad, right? We left those teachings to learn about how to get rich quick in America, right? So we don't hold none of our foremothers and fathers wisdom as we hold other nations of people wisdom, right? We believe in fortune cookies more than we believe in Proverbs 22:6. And it's hard to truly gather the people together when you're doing things like this, right? Raising our children as if we're friends. Can we go back to Sirach 30 real quick? Sirach 30.
Yes.
Because again, all of this is going into characteristics of scattering the people, right? So lack of discipline is what we're talking about right now. Lack of accountability, lack of discipline, right? All of that comes from is being void of wisdom, but more importantly, being void of the fear of the Lord. I fear the Lord. And I tell people all the time when I buy them stuff, I can't buy you pork, you know? And people look at me crazy when I say that. But I always say, man, I can't buy you no pork, bro. People ask me, oh, you can buy me, a sandwich. And I tell people, hey, I can't buy you no pork, you know? And they look at me like, why you can't buy pork? I said, because I don't eat pork and neither should you. You know what I'm saying? Then they go into more detail. Then we start going into the scriptures. But nonetheless, I say that because, again, not tooting my own horn, but just holding myself accountable to not suffer sin upon my brothers and sisters, you know? Because, again, my job is to help gather the people together, not scatter. And if I make excuses for them, oh, they're not in the truth, so the laws of God don't apply to them. All I'm doing is furthering the affliction, right? But let's go back to this Sirach 30. Scroll down real quick. Um,
Hold on, let me get this scam stuff off my screen. If it'll let me. Dealing with viruses, man. I ain't talking about in my body. There we go.
Con, let's see. Go down to let's start at verse 7, right? Let's read verse 7.
The book of Sirach, chapter, what is it, chapter again?
30.
30 and verse 7. He that maketh too much of his son shall bind up his wounds, and his bowels will be troubled at every cry.
You're somebody who lifts your son up, right? Because you do this one thing, right? Go to verse 11 real quick. Read verse 11.
Verse 11. Give him no liberty in his youth, and wink not at his follies.
Right. The reason that you lift your son up, and the reason that you gonna cry, right? The reason that you're having sorrow of your child at their end is because you're giving them liberty and you're winking at their follies. Why? Because you're lifting them up higher than what they should be. Again, your child should not be your best friend. And that was one of the points I made to my wife, is that the reason I'm harping on this point anyway, lack of accountability, lack of discipline. Again, this just came from my experience at a high school basketball game last night. I haven't been to a high school game since I think I graduated high school, honestly, right? But this made me, Salakia, this made me look at this because I feel as if in today's generation, the parents who are raising these young people are giving these children too many excuses to do whatever they want, right? I feel like this generation of parents is giving these young children, they're winking at their foolishness a little too much. They say stuff, oh, you just like your dad. Oh, he's a kid, he'll get out of it. Oh, yo, you bad as whatever. You know what I'm saying? And we speak these things over our children, and then they act like they act, right? Again, that's another way you help scatter the people. Matter of fact, it's my position that this is the greatest way to help scatter the people is by winking at the folly of the children, right? You allow children to do stuff for so long uncorrected, it'll become a habit to them. And they'll just do it again. They'll just do it because at the end of the day, they felt like it's not wrong to do because mommy or daddy never corrected me. Again, we talked about this on live last week, talking about the dude who was in court going to jail or death row or something, and he was talking to his mom. The brother Azrael brought that out. And he was talking to his mom about how, you remember when you let me do X, Y, and Z and you didn't say nothing? All of this is because of you, right? Again, the message last week was to be held accountable for our own actions, but more importantly, we gotta, like I said last week, and I'll say it again today, We got to make sure, parents, that we're holding our children accountable for what they do. I can't allow my son to go out here and hang with everybody. Not because I just look down on my people, but because I know that all my people are not my people, right? There are some of my people who want to get into mischief. I don't want my son getting into that. So my son can't be friends with everybody, right? I gotta hold down my son's neck. You know what I'm saying? I gotta do like verse 13, verse 12 says, bow down his neck while he is young, beat him on the side while he's a child, lest he wax stubborn. I gotta do like verse 13 says, and chastise thy son, and hold him to labor, lest his lewd behavior be an offense unto thee. I gotta do that. We should all want to do that as parents. We should all want to hold each other accountable as friends in the truth. You know, and like I say, it's not a message of just straight accountability. I'm just talking about characteristics of how we help scatter the people. And the biggest thing, the biggest reason we have issues in our community is because it starts with the children, and we fail the children every time we choose to wink at some things that they do, certain behaviors, certain things. My wife gets mad at me because I'm always getting on to her about, not always, but there's been times where, for instance, one of my pet peeves is when my son uses anything that's his sister's, because my daughter's, like her cup, certain clothes, like her clothes. I mean, of course, her clothes, but her shoes, they're all like bright colors. And I get it. Colors specifically has no sex. But typically, generally speaking, there are colors associated with gender roles, right? That's why at gender reveals, it's always blue for boy and pink for girl. So my daughter has pink cups. I do not like when my son has a pink cup in his hand, right? That's my biggest pet peeve, is when my son is using anything that belongs to my daughter, or is putting on her clothes, or wearing anything that's associated with her. So I get I kind of, my wife hates it, but I kind of jump down on it real quick when I see that, because it bothers me. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying I start beating my wife. That's folly. I don't do that. But what I'm saying is if it goes on when I'm not around, and when I'm around, I let it continue to go on, they're gonna grow up thinking it's okay for me to, uh wear my sister's clothes, or it's okay for me to drink, to use my sister's cup. It's okay for me to put on my sister's nail polish. It's okay for me to wear my sister's makeup. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of people will look at me like I'm crazy and I'm thinking about it too much. Oh, they're children. It's innocent. They don't know no better. They don't know better. I do. So I got to be the one to make the correction now, or else they're that behavior that they don't know no better about. They're going to grow up thinking it's okay to do because daddy never said nothing or mommy never said nothing, you know?
It's
So,
always it's always good not to toe the line, man. Because one thing about children or dogs or anything that you're trying to raise, you don't want to toe the line, because you never know when the light bulb is going to go off for them. You never know, and a lot of times we toe the line, like, and give them grace, but they end up understanding things before we understand that they understand it, right? We don't give them credit about how smart they are. So before you think they understand it, they have already understand it. And by that time, it's too late. So that's why you got to nip the thing in the bud a whole lot earlier, like the brother's saying right now, right?
right. Because again, we're talking about characteristics of scattering the people, right? One of the things that the Lord commanded us to do in Deuteronomy 20, Deuteronomy 21, is that we need to put evil away from among us in Israel. A lot of the things that we see today are evil in the eyes of the Lord. Our women making songs about sexual perversion, our young men. And again, not only does it start with the children, the brother Denal did a lesson on this like 2 years ago, and it said, in the lesson was titled, "It Starts with the Men." You know what I'm saying? Because again, the men in our community have to stand up and truly want to be men again, want to be leaders, want to be good fathers, want to be great examples, good brothers to one another, right? We got to stop with all this competition. We got to stop with all this killing one another. We got to stop with all this, oh, that's him. That ain't got nothing to do with me you know, type of living. It does have everything to do with you, because again, we have to look at ourselves as the same people in order for us to get in a better situation, you know? My neighbors who live next door to me, right? What I like to do is I try to like to keep my yard clean. So I like to pick up any like little trash in my yard, especially like when we're throwing boxes out and there may be chip bags or stuff that may fly out those boxes. I gotta pick it up because that stuff that I don't pick up may go into my neighbor's yard. And now not only does my yard look bad, but now my neighbor's yard look bad, and so on and so forth. So even though and look at it like this, a lot of the stuff that I pick up in my yard didn't even come from me. It didn't even come from trash that I took out my house. I have a neighbor who lives next to me that has small children. It used to be a lot of the stuff that his daughters was playing with that somehow magically find their way into my yard. But you know what I did? I still picked it up. Why? Because even though it wasn't my trash, it was in my yard. It made my yard look bad. And we're neighbors. And I want to keep the community clean as much as possible. I'm not saying my house is the best on the block because it don't. But what I'm saying is that I try to at least do the little thing by keeping the yard looking good as far as not having no trash in there. It ain't time to cut the grass yet, but when it does, I'm going to make sure I stay on top of cutting the grass this year a lot better than I did last year. Why? Because again, it all reflects my community, my immediate surroundings, right? If my neighbor's house was for sale, but my house looked like trash, the value of his house may go down because of the way my house looks. You see what I'm saying? It all works together, right? It all works together to an extent. And I'm not saying that to say that, again, we know in Deuteronomy where it talks about every man is going to be put to death for his own sin. The brother Azrael just read that last week's Sabbath on live, right? But the point I'm making is that, yeah, they're going to be answered for their sins, right? You're not going to answer for their sins, but you're going to answer for the influence you had on their sin. If I suffer sin upon them, trust and believe it's a sin unto me, right? And that's the way we got to look at it. I don't want to suffer sin upon my neighbor, right? By getting angry and wanting to commit any type of violence against me. So what I'll do is I'll make sure that anything that I let overflow into my neighbor's yard, I pick it up before they even have to come address me about it. Or I'll just go ahead and pick up the trash that maybe my neighbor puts in my yard without saying anything, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter about whose trash it is, it's still trash. You know what I'm saying? I can just throw it out, I can do my due diligence. And that's all I'm saying is when it comes to the nation of people, the way we help scatter the people is by not having a nation mindset. The way we don't have a nation mindset is by having that I, me, you know what I'm saying, mindset. Not that we mindset, And we say this all the time. It doesn't matter if, Black Americans have billions of dollars. What are we doing with those billions of dollars? That's what matters. Yeah, we got Jay-Z, we got Michael Jordan, we had Kanye. But what is coming of all this money and power and access to money that we're getting nowadays? Nothing good is coming from it because we're turning blind eyes to sin, because that's the way we make the money, is by sin, right? And that comes from us having I I and me mindset, not this we mindset, right? So it all goes back to, again, accountability, discipline. It all goes back to, a nation mindset. I think that's what I can replace from saying whatchamacallit. Instead of saying claiming the truth, we can just talk about having a nation mindset, right? You can't have a nation mindset and if you're thinking that this breakdown specifically belongs to you. You can't have a nation mindset if you allow your child to go out the house looking any kind of way. And I'm not talking about like they just got out of bed, but I'm talking about specifically our daughters. You got a daughter, she's a full-figured young woman. You letting your daughter go out the house with little shorts on, right? Little t-shirt on, and she's a full-figured young girl. She's 17, but look like she's 25 if she didn't have an ID. And you letting your daughter go out the house like that, it's not a nation mindset. Because yeah, you got to be responsible and man enough to possess your vessels, like we read in First Thessalonians all the time that the brother Azrael brings out. But at the same time, you got to realize that they're still kind of suffering sin upon one another, right? If I don't have my wife looking some type of modest at the house, some man is going to try to approach her when she goes out into public. And now that man is falling in lust to my wife, and in his heart, he's committing adultery because I'm not telling my wife to wear some clothes that's not revealing your good parts to the general public. You see what I'm saying? All this stuff works together, you know? So it was the nation thing, it was the accountability and discipline thing, right? Uh let's go real quick to Zephaniah chapter 2 and 1, because I know the brother Azrael read this last night too, but I want to read it again. Let me see. Con, right? Let's read this real quick. Start at verse number 1.
Zephaniah 2:1. Gather yourselves together, yea, gather together, O nation, not desire.
Right. Gather together, nation not desired, right? We got to have some sense of community about us, and our people are such hypocrites, man. And it bothers me because, again, brothers on the screen are brothers that want our people to be together and thrive and be successful. I love living around my people, but at the same time, it definitely is risks that are associated with living around my people. But I don't want to go say, if I was to have money, I want to go live amongst the white folk. You know, that's just not something that I want to do. Back in the day, that used to be my mindset. I want a gated house I want a big house in a gated community. And majority of the people that live in those type of houses, right, would be other nations of people. But I love living amongst my people. I want to be surrounded by, our people, whether they in the truth or not, and not because, oh, you know, I just want to, I guess you could say, not because I want to just be the guy, to look at it as some sort of reward, but I just feel like that's the way it should be. That's the way it used to be. I want to get back to the way things used to be, you know. I want to get back to being around my people and feeling safe and comfortable, because at the end of the day, if I can't feel safe around my people, I can't feel safe around nobody else. You know, that's just the truth of the matter, right? I shouldn't want to go look to, Brad and Brian down the street, right, for protection and safety, when I can go to Marquez next door and say, hey, Quez, can you look out for me real quick? Or Quez can come to me and say, hey, False, Isaiah, can you look out for me real quick? You know what I'm saying? That's the way it should be, you know? And I love that type of community sense. That's what we need to get back to, gathering together. The way we gather together is by holding each other accountable. You know what I'm saying? By disciplining our children, by holding our friends accountable for actions, right? By having those tough conversations that people stray away from. You got to be somebody that's willing to have a tough conversation, right? You got to be somebody that's willing, to confront somebody about their wrongdoings or their actions that you disagree with. At the end of the day, if you're their friend and it bothers you, talk to them about it. Don't shy away from it, right? Don't be somebody that runs from conflict or confrontation, because at the end of the day, that's how we change the community, is by having conversations that are not so easy to have with one another. You know, you can't just sit up here and just let people be like, well, hey, that it is what it is. Sometimes you gotta, hey, you going off. Hey, you shouldn't have said that. Hey, you shouldn't have did that. Hey, I think that you don't need to be doing this because of X, Y, and Z. You know what I'm saying? You got to be that type of person to want to hold your brother, your sister, your friend, your neighbor accountable. You may not feel like you offended your friend, but if you're a friend that feel like you got offended, you need to go to your friend, right? That may not be your child that's dressed like that, but if you feel like you have a problem with it, maybe you need to go to their parent and say, hey, I know so-and-so. Now people can see it as, oh, you minding your own business, right? That ain't your child. But you got to tell them, hey, look, I understand it's not my child, it's not my business. But I know that my child, he tends to, have issues when X, Y, and Z, you know? It may not go the way you may think, but at the end of the day, you're starting a conversation that may need to be had, right? And I feel like all the nations should do that, you know. Let's read verse 2. Let's read verse 2 real quick.
Verse 2. Before the decree bring forth, before the day pass as the chaff, before the fierce anger of the Lord come upon you, before the day of the Lord's anger come upon you.
See, again, and the brother brought this out. Well, I don't think you brought this out last week. Did you bring out Ezekiel 3 last week where it talks about warn them? I want to say you did. I know you went to Ezekiel, but I can't remember exactly which I don't remember if you went to 3 or not. But nonetheless, what I'm saying, Ezekiel 3 commands us to warn the people, right? Warn the people. So our job, while we get on here on Sabbath, we bring out precepts, we have conversations, we talk about stuff, is to warn the people. Pretty much that's all we're doing is warning the people. We got to tell our people the truth regardless of how it make them feel. Even our brothers and sisters in the truth, we got to tell them the truth regardless of how it make them feel, right? Our job is to warn. We got to send the message out. My thing is, we got to do a better job at letting our people know right from wrong, right? Because at the end of the day, we're not going to have an opportunity. We may not always have the opportunity to go back and have a conversation with that person. You know, you may be their only ever encounter with the truth. Why not go ahead and give it to them? You know, why not go ahead and tell them about it, right? Certain behaviors, again, we wink at and we dismiss and pass because why? We feel like that ain't got nothing to do with us. That ain't my child. That ain't me. You know what I'm saying? Or at the end of the day, hey, they make the decision for themselves. They grown. No, right? Even adults can be retaught something, right? And so that's the whole point of me just bringing out, you know, those 2, maybe 3 characteristics of, you know, scattering the people, right? A lack of sense of nation, a lack of sense of nationality, I guess you can say, a lack of accountability, a lack of discipline, right? All of those things work together for the same thing. There are all ways in which we scatter the people, right? And there's going to come a day where the day of the Lord is going to come, and you got to ask yourself the question: did I really help gather the people together? Did I do my best at, you know, holding myself accountable? Did I do my best at holding, you know, my brothers and my sisters accountable, those who I fellowship with? If you have friends that are not in the truth, do you talk to them about the truth at all? Do you invite them to feast days, holy days? Do you mention to them that they shouldn't wear or they shouldn't eat certain things because the Lord commanded us not to do so? Have you done those things? Or do you just, like The Rock said in his song, don't say nothing because you don't want to be offensive, right? You know what's more offensive than telling your friend that they're wrong for wearing what the Lord said they can't wear? It's more offensive to not tell them that and disobey the Lord because you were scared about how they felt. So your fear of men was greater than the fear of the Lord. That is more offensive in the eyes of the Most High. So you're going to pay for that. Just something to think about, man. You know, I know this ain't a think about it Thursday lesson, but you know, just Sabbath discussion, class, breakdown, vent session, like I said, whatever you want to call it. But again, we got to stop scattering the people. You know, we got to stop turning a blind eye to wickedness, right? We got to put evil away from among us. We got to be people who don't wink at follies, right? We got to stop giving people a pass, regardless of who they are, regardless of their position, regardless of their title or how many years they've been in the truth. We got to stop giving people a pass because you don't want to offend them because, yeah, I want them to learn the truth, but I don't want to offend them with it. So I'm not going to say nothing about it right now because then what if they die 2 weeks later and you didn't mention the truth when you had an opportunity to do so? Then what? Now they ain't going to learn. They could have repented. But because you were scared, because you didn't want to hold them accountable, because you feared them and how they felt about you more than how the Lord felt about you in that moment, now they don't have a chance to repent. So these are things that we just got to think about as a people, right? And why we should stop scattering the people. Because again, like the brother Denar brought out last night, there's a nation of people who Christ came to redeem. And it's not because everybody else is just going to die and burn in hell. No, that's not the teaching. But it's just to say that, like Proverbs 29:2 says, when the righteous are in rulership, the world rejoice, right? But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. The world needs to be rejoicing. We've mourned a lot. So the righteous got to be put in rulership. And the only way to do that is by gathering the people together, right? Hold on, Wild. One quick. Hold on, Wild. One moment, right? But I don't got nothing else. Do y'all got anything else to
Like, man, that's good. I don't have any precepts or anything, but that's a good lesson, man. And it reminds me of the talents, man, and the one person that hid his talent, right, because he was afraid of losing it, right? It's the same thing that we're talking about here about those that are afraid to offend folks, man, that are afraid to jump off the porch and to help this mission in gathering, gathering our people or gathering those that are a part of this elect, right? And one thing I will say about that is that, it's going to put you in uncomfortable positions, and it's going to be an inconvenience at times, right? But it's all for the greater good, right? To put our will aside in the Lord's will forefront. The same thing Christ was doing, right? A lot of that stuff that he was doing one could think it would be an inconvenience to him, but he realized why he was down here on this earth, and that was to gather the people, right? As a hen gathered her chicks, right? And one thing about a hen, man, that gather her chicks, or just any animal in general, they're not at ease until every single last one of them are, close to them, right? Whether that be dogs, sheep, goats, or anything, right? And so we have to have that same mentality. We have to be uneasy and not at ease until we know that we can help everybody that's around us. And that's going to help us to gather and not scatter, if that makes sense.
Wanted to just reiterate, right? Because it was a good lesson to piggyback off the lesson last night. So just wanted to, reiterate Matthew 12:30, as it says, "He that is not with me is against me, and he that gathereth not with me scattereth abroad." So you could say, I don't be scattering nobody, but just the very act of you not gathering. And what does gathering look like? Keeping the commandments and doing what the Bible tells you to do. The Bible tells you to rebuke. The Bible tells you to chastise. The Bible tells you to do anything. That's part of the gathering, because you're gathering the sincere, you're gathering the elect, you're gathering the righteous. We're not just gathering anybody. So if you're not doing that, by default, you're furthering the scattering. You're allowing wickedness to keep going. So you're scattering by default, right? So it's either you're doing one or the other. There's no in between, right? You can't play it safe in this. Like the brother just said, you can't hide your penny. You can't hide
be lukewarm.
Talent, right? You can't be lukewarm. You're gonna be spit out, right?
You can only serve one master. It's all this stuff connects.
So you
16 and 13, and I'll say this too before we close. Sometimes people feel like they're playing that middleman, and you think you're doing a service. You think you're doing a good service, but really you're doing a disservice, because, like the brother just said, if you're lukewarm, the Lord can't use you. If you try to play both sides, that means you're not serving the Lord, you're serving Satan. You know what I'm saying? Right? So therefore, the Lord can't use you. Right? Again, we got to want to be bold for the word of the Lord for any occasion. You got to want to correct everybody at every opportunity you feel like there needs to be something said. Right? Again, we got to stop letting even the slightest things slide. And I know we have a saying, sometimes we take people for what they are, but this is 2025. We got to stop taking people for what they are. We got to start telling people about themselves. Hey, if I'm late, the brothers have held me accountable for being late before. You know what I'm saying? That's just straight up. That means I got to get out of bed earlier. Or if I'm going somewhere, I got to make plans to leave the house earlier to get to my destination on time. That's just straight up. But again, we got to start gathering the people. The way we do that is by holding each other accountable, by disciplining, but more importantly, by doing our part in keeping the commandments. And with you keeping the commandments comes all of those things. It comes to conversations. It comes to the soft rebukes or the hard rebukes if necessary, right? But you just got to not be the person to get tired of doing it. Some people, you get tired of saying the same thing, so you just choose not to say nothing at all, And I feel like that too sometimes, but then sometimes that fire get in me like, well, if I don't say nothing, then I'm hurting the situation more than I am helping it. right? But again, this has been another Sabbath class discussion lesson, whatever you call it. Most high willing, y'all were edified. This your brothers from the Hopeful Elect saying, Shabbat Shalom, all praises, glory, and honor be to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Lord willing, we'll be on here next week again, for one of our 2 to 3 streaming days, right? But we say Shalom.
Shalom.
Shalom.